Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with another reading vlog. Today we are going to be reading books that are outside of my comfort zone, so essentially just genres or I don't know, maybe like sub-genres. I've not exactly decided the TBR for this video yet. Generally just books that I wouldn't usually pick up outside of my comfort zone that I don't read a lot of. The first book we're going to read for this video is a memoir, but what I didn't realise, I have started it now, I'll talk about my thoughts on the book in a second. It's actually a short story memoir that's only 26 pages long. Still very out of my comfort zone though. I don't tend to read a lot of non-fiction in general. I don't read a lot of memoirs, but it is a goal of mine this year to read more of them. So, first book we are going to read for this video, it's more of an essay, Movie Star by Jessica Simpson. I don't know anything about Jessica Simpson. I don't really watch like films and TV very much, so I don't know very much about like Hollywood and actors and actresses, especially not from like a few years ago. But I was very intrigued by this. I got it for free on Kindle. And I do find like Hollywood and all that kind of stuff very, very interesting, especially like the behind the scenes of it. I thought this was not like a full memoir, but I thought it was longer than 26 pages. I thought this was a memoir more generally about her time kind of in the spotlight, kind of at the height of her career. This is, I wouldn't say this is set. I mean, it is, but like it's real life. This is based on the time in her life when she was just kind of rising up, like she was definitely becoming a well-known name in Hollywood at the time that this book is set. I don't know how to word that. Anyway, this isn't a full memoir. This is basically a short story, a real life short story about Jessica Simpson's interaction with a particular movie star that she literally just calls movie star. I don't know who he is. I am going to Google it after. I don't know who it is because I don't know anything about pop culture at that time, again, especially to do with like Hollywood actors, actresses. So I don't actually know who we're talking about, but it's basically her romance experience, interactions with this movie star, and talking just kind of a bit more generally about love and romance and things like that in Hollywood at the time, and a few different kind of experiences and interactions that she had. It's definitely not very fleshed out. Like one point, again, none of this is spoilers because it's just her real life, but at one point she's married and gets divorced, and that's covered in like 2 sentences. Like, we're not interested in that, we're focusing on the movie star. And as I said, it's literally 26 pages, but for the first couple of pages I was like, this isn't for me, like I can't do this. However, I carried on, and I am going to read the whole thing because it's so short. I'm now 50% through, which is a whopping 13 pages, and tell me why I'm really kind of enjoying this. It feels very reminiscent, not necessarily in the content because obviously this is about an adult, but it feels in the style that it's written and the kind of experience that I'm having. Picking up like a celebrity gossip magazine and reading an article about like a salacious story about your favourite celebrity, that's what this book / novella feels like. I have finished Movie Star and I gave it 2 stars. It went downhill after I last spoke to you. I said to you before that I was quite enjoying it. It felt like just a little article from a magazine. But after that it went downhill. After that we really just focused in on this relationship. It wasn't even a relationship, this encounter or series of encounters with this unnamed movie star. There is speculation online as to who it might be. I have no idea, as I said. I don't know these people. But yeah, I gave it 2 stars. We've really focused in on the romance, whereas before the romance, literally wasn't even a romance. Before that, she was talking just a bit more generally about, not in detail about life in Hollywood, but a little bit about life in Hollywood, a bit about relationships and how that worked in the industry and things like that, which I found much more interesting. Even on like kind of a surface level, it wasn't really deeply explored. I found that much more interesting than this random, like she was just sat in a hotel room, like the second half of the the second half of the essay. I don't even know what to call it. But yeah, it felt weird to like rate someone's life, and I think I usually don't unless it's like a 5-star. But this, like, you've put this out into the world and you're selling it. Now, if she'd written this length of book about like, you know, like a deep important topic, and who am I to decide what's deep and important, but like this really wasn't deep. Like it really wasn't. If she'd written about something, you know, like a horrible experience, like completely fair to share that. But this, you're selling this for $2.99, and it, like, for what? Like, it's just a random story that she could have put on a blog. It's like, why did you need to sell this to people? Like, it could have been in a book, it could have been on a blog, because it's not, I feel rude saying like it's not enough to stand on its own, because again, who am I to decide what an important experience in someone's life is? But this really was just like a one-time encounter, or like a couple of time encounter that she had with this random film star. Like, it really wasn't, it wasn't a life lesson, it wasn't anything deep, it wasn't a hard experience that she went through. Like, do you know what I mean? At the end of it, she just gets in the car with a mate and a dog and goes to New York. Like, it's not, I don't think it stands on its own. If this was a chapter in another book, I wouldn't have read this chapter and thought, that's crap, because it would have been part of a wider story. But just on its own, like, I just don't get it. I don't really get why this is being, like, sold to the general public. Again, I got it for free, so, like, that's fine. But yeah, feel weird rating it, but also 2 stars, so there we go. Let's move on to our next book for this video. It is indeed the same day that I started this video. I haven't finished Movie Star yet. I will have by the time you see this. You'll have already seen the wrap-up clip, but just to clear up any confusion, yes, it's the same day, because I'm listening to another book on audio, so I thought I would introduce that now, because I'm about to go out on a walk and listen to some of it. So, the second book that we are going to read in this video is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Classics are slowly, very, very slowly becoming more in my comfort zone. This is the second one I've read this year, which might not sound like a lot, but I haven't read any for like the last 5 years. We are slowly upping the amount of classics, not because I feel like I have to, but because there's a lot of them that I'm genuinely interested in, not just because they're classics, but actually in the story. Like The Great Gatsby, for example, really want to read that. I've been loving Jane Austen books recently. I read Emma in January and loved it. Also love Pride and Prejudice. So yeah, there's a lot of classics that I am just genuinely interested in. I have read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, read that years and years ago, and I love it. I rewatch the film every Christmas. It's one of my favourite stories. However, I have tried to read Great Expectations before. Didn't go too well, I DNF'd, but we're going to try again. And this time I'm going to listen to it mainly on audio. I do have a physical copy, so I can definitely swap in between as and when I feel like it. But I think I'll probably end up listening to most of this on audio, just because I tried to read it physically last time and found it harder to get into. Charles Dickens has quite a distinct writing style, in my opinion. Quite dry. And I think it worked, or didn't impact my enjoyment of A Christmas Carol as much, because that book was so atmospheric, Christmassy, even though it's not like a fun Christmas story, it had plot. Do you know what I mean? We had something to focus on. Whereas Great Expectations, not exactly the same vibe. It has a plot, but it's not as compelling of a plot. I feel like A Christmas Carol had a really distinct, interesting, fun plot to follow, even if the vibe wasn't happy. This book, the vibe isn't happy, and I'm a bit bored by the plot. We've basically got our main character, Pip, who is actually called Philip Pirrip, I believe. Quite complicated. His parents and I think pretty much all of his other siblings passed away, and he has been essentially raised by his sister. His sister, for the fact that she raised him, good, but she's not a great girl. She's very mean to him. She basically always says that, like, she wishes he was dead. She's not very nice to him. He doesn't have a great home life. And at the beginning of the novel, he meets this unsuspecting character and forms a bit of a, not like a friendship, but just a bit of a agreement kind of with this character. I've just kind of seen that unfold. I'm not very far in. I think I'm like 8% into the book, so I don't have too much more to say. I am still bored. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not obsessed, but I think maybe going out on a nice sunshine walk in nature and just listening to it and focusing hopefully will get me a bit more in the mood to read this book. We will see. I'm not scared to DNF it. If I'm not enjoying it, I'll DNF and we'll read something else. I'm not forcing myself to finish the books in this video if they're just out of my comfort zone and I'm not going to enjoy them. But I do want to give this one another go, especially because I own a copy of it. I have loved, obviously, another work by Charles Dickens, so I do want to give it a go. So off we go, out on a walk, and let's listen to some more of Great Expectations. I am 19% again, as always when I'm sat here, ignore the washing behind me. I am 19% through Great Expectations, which is chapter 12, and I'm gonna DNF. This is long enough or far enough into a book for me to know whether or not I'm going to enjoy it, and I have not for 1 second been having a good time. I just think this isn't the Charles Dickens book for me. As I said, I read A Christmas Carol, loved that. I really want to read Oliver Twist as well. I've seen the film. It was one of my dad's favourites when I was younger, so I really want to read that book, but I just think this one isn't for me. I'm not clicking with the characters, the plot isn't engaging me, and I think I need one of the two. I don't need both. I can deal with a book without much plot if I love the characters, or I can deal with a book where I don't quite love the characters but the plot makes up for it. This has neither. It also doesn't have the atmosphere. There's actually some classics where it doesn't really have a plot or particularly likeable characters. I'm thinking of Emma by Jane Austen. I adore that book and I actually did quite like Emma, even though we're kind of not supposed to. But I feel like that book had such like an atmosphere, and this one has an atmosphere, but it's just a really negative, sad one that I don't want to read about. So I think I'm just going to permanently DNF. I've tried twice. I just don't think this is a classic for me. Not 100% sure what book I'm going to read next. I have a couple of different options where I've got them in from my library. So I will have a think and I'll pop back in when I have decided. It's between Babel or Babel by R.F. Kuang and The Names, which I think is by Florence Knapp. But I'll talk to you about whichever one I choose when I've decided which one to go with. It's been 3 seconds. I'm going to read The Names by Florence Knapp. This is a literary fiction, which I don't read much of. Trying to read more of it this year because I've really been enjoying the couple that I have read so far in January. But yeah, typically don't read much. Been very intimidated for some reason by literary fiction, but I'm trying to get over that this year. So this is the next quest to do that. This book follows our main character, who I believe is called Cora, just from reading the back of the book. I've not started it yet. She has a son and she is going to basically register his birth and choose his name. There is a tradition in her family where I believe they name like the firstborn son or a son after the husband. However, from what I'm gathering from the blurb, I don't think her husband is a great guy. So she doesn't really want to carry on this tradition. She doesn't really want her son to take after her husband, so therefore doesn't want to give him her husband's name and kind of, you know, she doesn't want to create any likeness between them basically where she doesn't have to. But she knows that if she doesn't, there will be consequences. And this book, I think, follows 3 different time periods, 7 years apart each time, where she chose a different name. We basically get to see what the boy's life would look like if he had each of those names, which I think is super interesting. So that is the book that we are going to read for this video. I don't think it's an overly long book. I've got an audiobook copy from my library because I don't own the book on Kindle or physically. And the audiobook's only 10 hours. So I don't think it'll take us too long to listen to this one. I'm going to start listening to it now. I'm on my break from work. So I'll listen to a bit of it now. And I'll probably come back to you maybe when I'm like 10-15% through and give an initial impression of how I'm feeling about it. I am now 17% through The Names and I have mixed feelings. I can't say it's enjoyable. It's not enjoyable. Like, it's not a pleasant story. I would check trigger warnings. The premise is what I said earlier, in that we are flicking between different periods of time, different realities, I suppose, like alternate realities based on the name of the little boy. But it does get quite heavy in these realities, so I would definitely check trigger warnings. I don't want to spoil anything here, but if you are interested in this book, yeah, I would just check trigger warnings. So I can't say I'm having a good time and like it's enjoyable. I'm enjoying the process of reading this book, but I am finding the structure, I think the structure is making it a little bit hard for me to fully get invested and get to know the characters. We are changing time a lot, which I knew we were going to do, as I said before. Like, I knew we were flicking between different time periods, but I didn't quite realise it would be so often. I thought we might do like one reality, then another, when we're actually flicking between them quite a lot. And I feel like at this moment in time, I'm hoping this will change as the book goes on, but just where I'm at now, the different realities aren't quite different enough for me to fully tell them apart yet and for it to feel distinctive. So I am struggling a little bit. Like, I am able to comprehend like which reality we're in, but it takes a sec. For me, I have to like read a little bit of it. As I said, I'm listening to it on audio, so I don't know if that's making a difference, but like I am locked in and like concentrating on it. It takes me a few lines or like a minute or so at the beginning until she like says the name for it to click. The chapters are named like, shall I say the names? Is that a spoiler? Like Bear, Julian. But it takes a sec for it to click like what time period we're in, and you know what I mean? Just for everything to click back together, because we are moving so often between the different stories. But I'm not disliking the book. It's probably giving like 3.54 star vibes, but I'm not even 20% in yet. So we've got plenty of book left to go. I have finished The Names and I'm going to give it a 3 star. I think the structure of the book really let it down for me. I worried that it was because I'd listened to it on audio, so I went and read some Goodreads reviews, but a lot of people who read the book physically said exactly the same, that they found the structure quite difficult to keep up with and just a little bit clunky and awkward. We changed both time and perspective so often, and I feel like the different lives, they were distinct in big ways, but obviously we weren't always talking about big events. So I found it quite hard to distinguish between the different lives, or like the different realities in like the everyday chapters where we weren't necessarily talking about the big end event. Obviously I'm being vague, so I don't want to spoil anything, so hopefully that makes like some form of sense. But whilst they were fundamentally different in quite big ways, they weren't fundamentally different necessarily in the way the characters spoke or acted or the things that they were doing on a day-to-day basis. Do you know what I mean? So I did find it quite hard to differentiate, and I think therefore each reality didn't kind of hit me as hard because I was using so much brain power to try and figure out which one we were in. Even though, as I said, the names of the chapters are the name that the boy gets in each life, you still have to kind of remember, okay, this name corresponds to this ending and these characters, but like it's the same characters for the most part in each life, but you have to remember what role they're playing in each one. Quite confusing. I didn't feel like the lives were different enough for it to be easy to keep up with the amount of perspective and time changes that we had. It wasn't a bad book by any means, and I think this was a debut. Like, for a debut, this was a good book. I just think it maybe should have been structured a little bit differently. Like, maybe we should have just gone through each, like fully gone through one reality, then fully go through another, rather than maybe changing like so often between them. I don't know. But yeah, 3-star read. Glad I read it. Probably not one that I'm going to remember just because, as I said, it didn't hit me as hard as a book with these topics should. And I think that was just because I had to use so much brain power to figure out the structure of the book rather than focusing on the actual subject matter. But yeah, that is that book done. On to the next. The next book we are going to read for this video is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a fantasy which is set in Oxford in the 1800s. It follows our main character Robin. That isn't his real name, but that is the name that he goes by in the book for reasons. I don't want to like spoil too much because I went into this blind and I've been enjoying that experience so far. But essentially we follow Robin, and he is taken from China, where he was born and raised, to live in England, to eventually be sent to Oxford. And his job at Oxford is going to be a translator. And this book is like a mixture of two things. It's a fantasy book. We're not too much into the fantasy yet, where I am in the book, but it's a fantasy book. But it's also offering a lot of really great commentary on the history of Britain and the predatory nature of the history of Britain and its treatment and colonisation of many other countries. So I'm really enjoying that as well. I'm enjoying the like educational, like obviously I knew that. I knew like Britain's history is, you know, based on like theft and colonisation. Like I knew that on a reasonably high level, but it's really interesting to hear more nuanced discussions. And even though this is fictional, it's obviously very much inspired by actual history, and it's really interesting to see the impact of this treatment on individuals as well in this book. So I am very much enjoying that aspect. As I said, we're not really into the fantasy yet, but I assume we're going to get there. It's definitely being mentioned, the more kind of magical aspects of the book, but I don't really think that's the point of the book, because it is like a dark academia fantasy. I think the magic is going to be there, but I think most of this is going to be about his experience at Oxford, and as I said, more about like Britain's history, which I am finding very interesting as someone that is quite into history but wants to always know more about it and about different periods of history. So I am having a great time so far. I'll probably check back in with you when I'm maybe like halfway through and let you know if my thoughts have changed or anything. But yeah, as of right now, very glad I picked this up, even though it is out of my comfort zone, and I am having a great time. Admittedly, this is a slightly late check-in because I am now 88% through Babel, so kind of nearly done, but also it's a big book, so I'm not that close to the end. We've still got a fair bit to go. Why am I kind of having a great time? By great time, I mean like the subject matter isn't enjoyable. It's, I think I mentioned before, touches a lot on the history of Britain and how Britain and the empire came to be what it was, and the cruel and predatory nature of that. So like the subject matter is not like woo, do you know what I mean? But I'm enjoying the reading experience. I'm really enjoying the historical aspects of this book. I'm enjoying the plot. We've got kind of, I feel like near the beginning of the book there wasn't so much of a plot per se. We were just following the experience, like there was, but I don't want to make it sound like the book was slow. It wasn't. I feel like we were just following the experiences, mainly of Robin, but also kind of his friends as well. Just seeing how they fit in or didn't and how they were treated at Oxford. And now we've got kind of a plot. I don't know how to describe. I don't want to make it sound like the book had no plot. It did, but now we've got kind of a central plot, something that we're rooting for. Obviously, I'm not going to say what. I don't want to spoil where this book goes because I went in blind, and I'm really enjoying the fact that I went in blind and I'm just experiencing it as it comes. I love the vibes. I love the Dark Academia vibes. I love that it's not... I'm not a big Dark Academia fan, for context. I can't remember if I mentioned that. That's one of the reasons why this book is out of my comfort zone. I have yet to read a Dark Academia that I loved. This could be the first one. I am kind of loving this. I like that this doesn't feel Dark Academia for the sake of being a Dark Academia book. I don't know how to describe what I mean. Like, I feel like R.F. Kuang isn't just putting elements in for the sake of being like, okay, tick list, Dark Academia trope. Like, it feels so real, and that's probably because it is rooted, obviously, in the real history of Britain. So that makes sense. But yeah, ultimately, I'm having a pretty great time with this book. Very intrigued by the plot. Actually care about the characters, which, again, I find in Dark Academia I don't usually. I feel like usually within this genre, at least the ones that I've read, we focus on a really small subset of characters, but I feel like we never get close to them. I always feel like I'm being kept at an arm's length. Whereas in this book, we are to like some extent, but also I definitely feel more of a connection to the characters. I feel like we've seen a lot more vulnerability from the characters than perhaps we usually do in a lot of Dark Academia. I feel like the characters in here are well-rounded. They're not just here to be like smart, pompous people for the sake of being Dark Academia characters. Again, they feel real, with real motivations, and it makes sense why each of them are doing the things they do. That's not to say I agree with them. Letty, get out, you little creep. It makes sense. The justifications, the backstory of each character makes sense. I really want to reiterate, I don't agree with the actions of every character, but R.F. Kuang has written it in such a way that you can feel... I don't feel connected to Letty, but like, we'll put her to one side. She's not included in this conversation. To the other characters, I feel connected to them, and I feel the emotion behind their actions and behind their thoughts and behind their opinions, and I really appreciate that. I feel like that emotion is sometimes lacking a little bit in Dark Academia. So yeah, I'm having a pretty good time. I'll pop back in when I have finished, let you know my final thoughts. I have just finished Babel, and I really enjoyed it. What I love about R.F. Kuang, I've read the first 2 books in the Poppy War trilogy. Decided not to continue with the first because I didn't love where the plot went. Great series, would 100% recommend. I just knew there was no point reading the 3rd book and rating it low when it was just completely personal preference, that I wasn't that interested in the plot and the story anymore, but it was fantastically written. And what I love about R.F. Kuang in the books I've read from her, she's not afraid to take risks. She's not afraid... I don't want to like spoil anything, but she's not afraid to do things that are going to hurt and stick with it and back it. That's how I feel anyway. I really enjoyed this. I've not 100% decided on my rating. I'm thinking a 4.25. I think I've settled on a 4.25. I'll put on the screen if I've changed my mind. But that feels accurate for how much I enjoyed this. It wasn't giving 5-star feelings. It didn't like absolutely blow me out of the water for the whole book. But I did have a great time reading this. I feel like I learnt so much even though it was a work of fiction. I feel like it really, I don't know, just enlightened me on topics that I already knew about and was aware of, but I think it was really seeing the effects on, yes, fictional, but that represent real people, seeing the effects on individual characters in this book of colonialism, of Babel, of this school, of the idea that, oh, but you've been given this fantastic opportunity and blah, 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 but like, have they though? Like, have they? It really opened my eyes to how exploitation can be dressed up and disguised as a fantastic opportunity, when actually, is the opportunity going to benefit the person you're giving the opportunity to, or are you giving them the opportunity to benefit you or to benefit something wider? It really opened my eyes to that as well. So yeah, I found this book very valuable. It was a nice mixture of learning and the historical side, but also the plot, which was all very much interlinked, don't get me wrong. But I think there's enough in here to entertain people who don't necessarily just want the historical side and don't want kind of... I don't want to say this was like reading a textbook, I really don't think it was, but that's kind of my point, is that this didn't feel like reading a history textbook, because it had that plot weaving through, and as I said before, like the characters felt like they had so much depth. it was just so good. I would 100% recommend this. Even if you're intimidated, I would really, really recommend this book. I had a great time. I didn't find it difficult to read. I also loved the bits about like etymology. I did study English at university, and I've always found words very interesting. Dialects, etymology, where words come from, how the meaning of words change or mean different things in different regions. Like, I am very fascinated by that stuff. So even when this plot was a bit slower and the characters were kind of having long dialogues and discussions about the etymology of words, I ate that up and I found it really, really interesting. So I think that probably helped that I was really interested in even like the slower parts of the book. But yeah, 4.25, had a great time. So glad I read this. I think I am going to read Catabasis. Is that how you say that? Catabasis? Not yet, not in this video, but at some point. I'm very interested now to read that book. I wasn't sure after I DNF'd the Poppy War trilogy. It was never a doubt in my mind that R.F. Kuang was an incredible author. I just wasn't sure if maybe her stories were for me. But now they are. The next book that we are going to read for this video though is The Correspondent, or The Correspondence by Virginia Evans. I will put the cover here. I've got this on audiobook from my library. I've heard a few people talk about this. I think the first person I heard talk about it was Sarah Caroli, and she gave this 5 stars. Basically, this book is told fully in letters. I think there's a couple of emails, but it's in a written correspondence format from an elderly lady, I believe. I don't know if it covers her whole life. Like, I've really not read into this at all. The reason this is a bit out of my comfort zone, letters in books can go one of two ways for me. I feel like I used to adore books that had letters in, but I fear it's become ever so slightly overdone to the point where it doesn't always hit anymore. However, because this one has got such good reviews, I thought we would give it a go. It's also out of my comfort zone just with it being literary fiction. I've actually read a fair few literary fictions this year, and I feel like it's slowly becoming more in my comfort zone. So maybe when I next film one of these videos, I can't put literary fiction in, because maybe it is almost in my comfort zone nowadays. But this one being completely told in letters is definitely out of my comfort zone. I'll do a check-in when I'm like a few chapters in so I can give you an actual synopsis. As you might tell from my videos, I like to go into books blind. Don't really read blurbs. I like to hear just a high-level overview of kind of what a book is about, so that I can decide whether I think I like it or not. And then I like to just go in quite blind. I don't want to know the intricacies. I low-key feel like blurbs spoil their own book sometimes. So yeah, I'm going to go into this one quite blind. But yeah, I'll come back when I'm not too far in and give you a bit of a better idea of what this book is about. I'm now 20% into The Correspondent, and this is written in such a clever way. Basically, we are with our main character Sybil when she is older, but the way that she writes letters and the range of people that she writes to means that we are getting glimpses into all different parts of her life, not just the present. So for example, she's currently writing a letter, without spoiling anything, where she mentions things from her childhood, or you'll get glimpses into past like situations that she's had with friends and things that she did at work in the letters that she's writing. But it feels really natural. It doesn't feel forced. It feels like these are actual letters and emails that you would just write to someone. And I think it's because the author hasn't tried to do it in like chronological order. We are like jumping about a bit, but not in a way that feels confusing, because it's all rooted in the present day. So there are letters that she's written over the years and like hasn't sent, but for the most part, she is writing the letters now in present day, at least in the part of the book that I'm on. I don't know if that's going to change. But most of the letters and emails she's writing now, like present day in the book, and just flashing back, which feels to me a lot less confusing. We're not actually jumping about in time. We're just flashing back and looking at like different parts of her life, which I am finding very interesting. I think the author has done such a great job at making it feel real, but also making it like an entertaining and enjoyable reading experience. So I'm having a great time. I'll pop back in when I'm halfway through if I've got anything to kind of add. If not, I'll just pop back in when I'm finished. It's quite a short book. Apologies that I'm going to have to talk quite quietly. I'm currently the only one awake. It is early on Sunday morning. But I wanted to talk to you about the book I finished yesterday and the book I have started. So yesterday I finished The Correspondent by Virginia Evans, and I think I've settled on a 4-star rating. Really enjoyed it, had a great time. It was so quick and easy to read. I think it was wonderfully written. I think the author did such a good job in having it be, as I said, all written in letters and emails, but it didn't feel dry, it didn't feel boring. It still felt like we were getting information and descriptions of things, and the way that Sybil, the main character, writes her letters is so beautiful. As I said before, you can tell she's just got such a love of words and of communication and of language. And that really came through in the way that she wrote her letters. It wasn't just quick, like, did this today, see you next week. Like, she really got into it when she was writing her letters. She used to sit down for 2 hours 3 times a week to write these letters and really dedicated a lot of her time to them. And you could tell that, like, you could tell that that's what the author was going for in the way that they read. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. It wasn't a 5-star. I didn't feel overly connected to Sybil as a character. Don't get me wrong, I would love to receive a letter from her and write one back. Would love that. But I didn't feel kind of overly connected to her. Another thing I did quite like is that she is definitely not a perfect person. She did something rather awful in her life that had dire consequences for other people. I really appreciated that Virginia Evans didn't try and make Sybil a perfect character. I think that really helped with the narrative and really helped the book not feel kind of boring and dry. The fact that Sybil wasn't perfect and it wasn't just a cookie cutter, easy life that she had. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the non easy bits were of her own making, but I think it just made for a more compelling read. The fact that she wasn't perfect. I don't really know what else to say about this book other than I recommend it. I had a great time. If you are looking to get into books that have letters and things in them, but you may be a bit intimidated, I think this is a great one to start with. It's not very long, and the letters are written in such a way that it feels like you're reading a normal book for the most part, just with like addresses and people's names in. I think it's good because it also kind of gives you an insight to other people's points of view as well, because you get to read the reply letters. They're not all letters and emails that are sent by Sybil. You also get to see the replies, so we get to see so many characters. The audiobook of this was also great because it had different narrators for each of the letters. So for example, there's a character in this that is from Scotland, and the audiobook narrator of the letters that come from the Scottish person is Scottish. So I do recommend the audiobook of this as well. I think it was really well done. As soon as I started listening to the audiobook and it listed like loads of different people as the narrators, I was like, yeah, we've got a full cast. This is going to be good. And it was good. So I would recommend listening to it on audio as well if that's something that interests you. But yeah, 4 stars. Enjoyed it. Really glad I read it. I have also made a start on our next book for this video. So the next book that we are going to read is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is the same author that wrote Piranesi. I haven't read that book, but I have seen quite a bit of hype around it. Piranesi is a very short fantasy book. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell is not short. It is a fantasy book, but it's very different. So basically the premise of this is that it's set in 19th century England, right at the beginning of the 19th century. I think it's 1803 that the book starts in, and we're following at the beginning a group of men who are magicians. But you learn right at the beginning of the book that magician to them means that they just study magic, not that they do magic. So they compare it to like a botanist. Botanists don't make new flowers, they study and I think care for existing flowers, which is kind of what they do. They study magic. And again, you find out very early on that magic has not been seen in England for quite a while, and these men are quite concerned by that. Some of them just want to study it, they don't want to see it come back, but a couple of them do want to see magic return to England. And the book, I should have said, is set in England. The beginning of the book is set in Yorkshire, but I think we're going to expand out and see different parts of England. But I'm from Yorkshire, so I'm fine if we just set it in the countryside of Yorkshire. So far, I am, for context, by the way, 5% in, which isn't much, but it's a 1,000 page book. So that's like 50 pages in. So enough to form like initial thoughts. And I am struggling. I can't lie. I am struggling because of the writing style. So this book was written in 2006, but it's written as if it's trying to mimic the writing style of the early 19th century. So I think Susanna Clarke is going for like a Jane Austen style. And I love Jane Austen's writing, but this is falling so flat. It's sitting somewhere, to me, between Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, but much closer to the style of Charles Dickens, which I don't love. I do love A Christmas Carol. Whenever I talk about not liking Charles Dickens' writing, just ignore A Christmas Carol. I think that really sits on its own out of the books of his that I've read. I've not given up on him, by the way. I am still going to try and read more Charles Dickens, as I said earlier in this video, but anyway. It's a bit too close to Charles Dickens' writing for my liking, which essentially means not much is happening. We're talking more about what they're eating, but it's not like interesting meals. Like it just got described to us that he was just sat in someone's big house eating bread. Like, oh, just get on with it. I want to know about the missing magic in England, not about your bread. So yeah, it's written as if it was a classic, but not quite as dense. I'll give it that. It's not as dense as a classic, especially like a Charles Dickens. It is more accessibly written than one of his novels, but it's in that style, which I think she has tried to replicate the style of the time rather than the style of the time the book was actually written in, which, as I said, was 2006. There's no whimsy. There's no fantasy feel. There's no magical feel at this point. There's no atmosphere really at all. We've very much focused at the beginning on this group of, maybe I'm presuming wrong, old white men is what they feel like. They all feel the same. I could not tell you any of the side characters or even the main character apart at this point, to be honest. They all feel exactly the same, other than a couple of different opinions on magic. They feel very similar. So we've spent a lot of time on the characters, but also not on actually getting to know the characters. It's really, really weird. Like, it's really weird. We keep getting told, like, basically what will happen is the character will take 3 steps and then we'll have 63 footnotes and 87 flashbacks before we actually do anything. And we've been told that there's a lot of old books that have been written on magic, as you might expect. But every time, like, that's not just one sentence. There are loads of old books on magic. No. You have to be told who wrote each one and then a bit about that character, even though they're not characters in this book. We're not getting told much about the characters in the actual book. We're getting told random boring shit about men who wrote these old magic books, but we're not getting told like the content of the magic books or what we might be able to look forward to. I think it'd be interesting if we were told like, oh, this was a magic book on this type of magic, and then we could be like, ooh, is that type of magic going to come back? Are we going to see that in the book? No, none of that. No intrigue, nothing. It's just a group of men at the moment doing nothing except complaining and just not really taking any action. The only character that's intriguing me is Mr. Norrell. He claims to still be able to do magic. Why can't we see more of him? Can we just follow him, please? I think we might be starting to at the part of the book that I'm on now. But seriously, like, let's just get on with it. I'm so over it. I am DNFing Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I got 11% in, and I don't even know where to start. So obviously we know I was finding it a bit boring. That was clear. However, I was honestly willing to sit with the boredom for a bit and give this book more of a chance. Like, when I got 10% in, I wasn't like, right, DNF. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not loving it right now. If you can hear noises, by the way, it's because I'm sat on a leather settee and I keep moving. Sorry, I'm not farting. I got 10% in and I was like, okay, do I want to finish this? I don't know. But like, I was still willing to keep reading at that point and give it a go. The writing still obviously the same, very dry, giving Charles Dickens rather than Jane Austen, which I think is probably what the author was going for. Just not for me. It just didn't work for me. We weren't getting, still 10% in, we weren't getting to know the characters, nothing was happening, the writing wasn't nice, and like, I need at least one of those. I need at least a plot, characters to get invested in, or gorgeous writing. You need to keep me interested somehow, and I was really bored. However, the thing that really sealed the deal for me, this group of men, or I think 2 men, Mr. Norrell was sat off to the side, I think, and then there were these 2 other men. They were looking at the dead body of a girl. This isn't a spoiler, obviously. I won't say who it was or what happened or anything. It's not a particularly big part of the story, I don't think. But yeah, they were looking at the body of a dead girl. At no point in this conversation did anyone say what a nice person she was, that it was a shame that she'd passed young or passed at all. Nothing. Do you know what they did say? One of them said to the other, she is exactly the type of creature you would have admired. Sorry, what? That's gross. That's a corpse. What? That's an actual dead body of a young girl. And that... No. Then I keep listening. I think, okay, maybe these men are supposed to be pricks. Like, maybe Mr. Norrell or someone else is going to come in and, like, say something, defend this girl, like, you know, because she can't. Maybe someone's going to say something to, like, make it clear that these men are in the wrong for saying that kind of thing. No, that didn't happen. What did happen was that, I can't remember if it was the same man or the other one. I was quite uninterested by this point. They said, I must remind all good-looking women that I know not to die. I must remind all the good-looking women that I know not to die. I'm hoping that I don't have to unpack that statement for anyone watching this video and why that's also vile. So I was like, this is the kind of character that I'm supposed to be following around in this book. I have no interest. No other character show me anything to the contrary, that any of these people are good people, interesting people, have anything about them whatsoever. So I just DNF'd. I don't need to be reading this book. It's not for me. I was very charmed by the premise, very let down by the execution, and that is that. I did also want to talk about a book for this video that I accidentally started and finished and didn't mention because I listened to it on audio all in one go, and that is Lush by Joanna Page. I don't read memoirs really. I read a couple a few years ago from like celebrities that I used to like Miley Cyrus, for example. I don't even know if it was like an autobiography memoir. I don't know if she wrote it. I used to read books like that when I was like a lot younger and was really into like celebrity culture. As an adult, I don't really read memoirs. I definitely want to get more into them. I do really want to read about more people's stories and what has gone on in like different people's lives and learn about different perspectives and things. So that's definitely something I want to do going forward. But as of right now, I don't read many. So again, quite out of my comfort zone. If you don't know who Joanna Page is, she played Stacey in Gavin and Stacey, which is where I predominantly know her from. She's done a lot with her career other than Gavin and Stacey as well, but that is where I personally know her from. And I did enjoy this book. It was different to what I was expecting. I thought it would be a bit more about her career, which at the beginning it definitely was. We went right from the beginning when she was in like drama school to landing the role on Gavin and Stacey, a few bits that she did after that. But then quite a lot of the book from there on out, I think it was from about 70% right to the end, focused on motherhood. Don't get me wrong, she has every right to write about whatever part of her life she wants in her book. I'm not saying this makes it a bad book. My interest personally waned past that point. I'm not a mother. I don't want to become a mother. That's not to say that I have any problem with people discussing their motherhood journeys. I often actually find it really, really interesting. Even though it's not something I want to do for myself, I do find it very interesting to hear about people's experiences of motherhood. In this instance, however, it felt a little bit repetitive. We heard about each of her births. That bit of the book did feel a little bit repetitive to me. It didn't really feel like too much. I suppose there's two ways it could have been more interesting. One of which to go a bit more into the detail of motherhood and what that experience was like, or to delve into a bit more about the balance, because like, don't get me wrong, just because she's releasing a book about her life, that doesn't mean she has to share details that she's not comfortable sharing. So if she didn't want to go into more detail, I think it could have been really interesting to hear more about, and she did touch on this lightly, but more about balancing motherhood and a career. And again, she did touch on both of those things, but I think both of them were done quite lightly in a way that didn't personally intrigue me. But it definitely wasn't a bad book. As I said, I don't want to make it sound as if I'm policing what people get to write in a book about their own life. Don't get me wrong. I was just personally more interested in hearing about a career, and I feel like we skirted over some parts of a career that sounded quite important and interesting. It was more kind of just a chronological retelling, I suppose, of events in her life rather than honing in on specific themes or experiences, again, which is fine. She can write her memoir however she wants. But yeah, I never know like how to rate or if to rate memoirs. If I was to rate this, I would give it a 4-star. It was well written, it was enjoyable, I listened to it all in one go, I was interested for most of the book. But yeah, I feel weird rating them because like it's someone's life. This one felt a lot more lighthearted. It was written in a very kind of jokey, chatty way, which I did enjoy as well. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that I read another book that was out of my comfort zone and just completely didn't say anything about it in this video because I just sat and listened to it all in one go. But there we go. I don't know how many books now I've read in this video. I will either come back in and tell you what we're going to read next, or come back in to round this video out. I've not decided yet if we're going to read anything else. A gorgeous iPad clip to round out this video. I'm just sat editing, and this is indeed the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please give it a thumbs up down below if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.